The next thing, we'll move on to another example of simulation here. Now, probably in this simulation, we got three different servers. Like we have a finance server, I think we have a DNS server, and then we have some public server, web server, let's say. So we have different servers here. So this is based on access list, where we are going to filter some of the traffic. So everything is configured here, my like routing and everything. And we got some users here. The users names are like ABCD. Probably the names can be anything, it doesn't matter, but here I'm just using ABCD names. And IP addresses are already given. What are the IPs they use? So these are the IPs of the host. Like here you can see 33.1234, and already the IPs of the finance server and the web server is also given. Like the finance server, let's say the IP address is 240.23. I have just written here .23.20 here .17 like this. Of course, these are like 1, 2, 3, 4 IPs. So they're in different subnet. Basically, this subnet, if you want to communicate, you have to go to this router, and from there you have to reach these servers on F0 by 1 interface. This is how you need to go. Okay, so different subnets. Even though there is one router, there are different LANs. So they have to go via router only. So most of this configuration is done. Now the task here is we need to configure the ACL. So by default, the users A, B, C, D are able to access any of these servers. But now you want to do some restriction policy or a security policy which tells that the host C, like here I'm taking an example of host C, should be able to access the financial web server, which means the C host can go and access the finance web server. This is your finance web server. But the rule says that only host C should access the finance web server, whereas all the other hosts should not access. So which means if A, B, and C, if they're trying to access the same finance server, that should be denied. So finance is a web traffic again, and all other traffic should be permitted, means all other traffic should be permitted. So there are typically 3 rules we need to configure, because in the question itself it says, you cannot go with more than 3 rules. The password is Cisco here. So the first rule is we need to write a rule which is going to say permit. So what's the first rule we need to write? We need to write the rule. First rule is going to be permit. If the C host is trying to access the finance web server on port number 80, should be permitted. That's the first rule. And the second rule is I'm going to say from any host, any source, if they're going to access the finance server on port number 80, that should be denied, right? Because that is what the question says. The question says you need to allow the permit for only C, but no other user should access the finance server. So which means any source, the destination is finance, and deny that. And after that, we need to say permit. The third rule is going to be, so this is your first rule, this is your second rule, and the third rule I'm going to write is permit IP any. So all the remaining traffic, because the question did not say that deny this DNS server, deny the public server. Basically, remaining people means everyone should be able to access the other services. So we need to make sure that we permit IP any, and then we need to apply this on the outbound direction here, because we are taking this as a source, right? So basically the traffic comes when it is coming on this interface, it is leaving outbound. So we'll apply on the outbound direction. So that's going to be your task here, where we'll create ACL rules in this way. So if you just want to confirm the IPs, you can confirm, but normally in the questions, the IPs may change, okay? And the rules may slightly change. So let's go ahead and configure this rule. In this rule, the first rule is what? So the first rule says we need to permit the host C should be able to access. What's the first rule? Should be able to access your finance web server, right? So finance server on port number 80. That's the first rule. So let's write the first rule, and the second rule is we need to deny any user accessing the finance web server. And of course, the third rule is we need to permit all the remaining traffic, that is permit IP any. And then finally on the interface F0 by 1, I'm going to apply on the outbound direction, depending upon the direction it is outbound here. So I don't need to verify any other things. So once you get into the router command line, I can just go and say, if you want, you can just go and verify the interface IPs, but normally not required. This is the interface F0 by 1. If it asks for the password, use the password as Cisco. And of course, I need to go to the global configuration mode. We'll say extended ACL access list, any number you can use. And then I'm going to say permit. What is the first rule? The first rule is permit. Permit and protocol. This 80 is HTTP, comes under TCP protocol. So we need to say the category is going to be TCP. And what is the source address? The source address, I'm going to take it as C is a source. So the IP address of the C, I need to check the IP address of the C. So this is your IP address, 192.168.33.3. So I'm going to say 192.168.33.3. That's an IP address. Of course, I have to say host or the wildcard mask. And what's my destination? Destination is your finance server. So the finance server, what is the IP here? You can see the IP here clearly. This is the host C IP. This is the finance server IP address. So the finance server IP address is, we need to say host 172.22.242.23, and of course equal to port number 80. So we said permit, and the second rule says deny all. So which means I don't need to change this. I just need to go and say deny TCP. The source address can be any, right? The source can be any. So if you see the next rule, better you write complete once again. Let me write down that. Access list 100, we need to say deny TCP from any source going to finance server. What is my finance server address? This one. Host 172.22.242.23 equal to 80. And the third rule says permit all the remaining. So I'm not going to deny remaining. I don't want to disturb the other traffic. So we need to make sure that the other servers, everyone can access. So we don't need to restrict that. And finally, we have this interface F0 by 1, not F0 by 0. So check the interface. So as per my diagram, here it is F0 by 1. And I need to apply this outbound. So we need to say IP access group outbound direction. So additionally, in the exams, if you may have host, generally this PC, you generally have a host. Generally, if you click on this, you may get a browser kind of thing where you can test. If you just want to test and confirm this, you can do in our packet tracer as well. You can just simply go and type in the IP address of your finance server. So what is our IP finance server? 172.22.242.23. That's an IP address. So if I go and say I'm able to access from C, that's the question, but all the remaining should not be able to access, which means if I try to go and access from A to the same IP, that should not work. So maybe in the exams you don't have access to these PCs. Generally, when you click on this PC, you may have access. So you just need to initiate a request from there. But again, once you're done with the configuration, so we need to say copy run start to save your configurations, which confirms that this is your requirement. Okay, so basically this is like a simple ACL statement, extend ACL statement. Looks a little bit complicated, but mostly you need to understand the scenario. And probably these addresses, IPs can change, may be different than what I'm saying, or maybe these finance server addresses may be different, or maybe sometimes the question may be asked like, okay, host B should not access should access the web server, host B, let's say, and the same thing, deny others accessing the web server and permit IP any. So if you check the PDFs, normally the one which I have shared, you'll probably find the different variations of the same question. Okay, so the IPs can change, the rules may change slightly, but overall the format of the rule will be similar. Maybe 2-3 statements he will ask you. According to that, you need to configure the rules.